So it's March again, which I find a little strange because I'm pretty sure that March just happened a few months ago. At least it feels that way. I remember standing in a grocery store last year holding one of those plastic containers of blueberries and thinking something like, oh, okay, it's starting to get warmer again. And now it's pretty much the exact same moment, and I'm in the same store with the same fluorescent lighting that makes everything look kind of expired. Probably listening to the same song playing overhead like it's been on loop for the past 15 years. And I really don't know where the middle part went. Maybe you can relate to this. It's not anything particularly alarming. It's more like it just didn't stick or something. Somewhat it's like you're trying to remember a dream that you had a few hours after you wake up. You know something happened, but when you reach for it, it just kind of dissolves, I guess. And there's something a little disorienting about that. It's like when you got two clocks in a room that are out of sync, and you don't notice it at first, but when you do notice it, you can't unnotice it. It just sits there slightly off, not to mention it's a little annoying. Anyway, that's what this feels like. And I noticed this in these these random moments, such as if I'm waiting at a crosswalk for the light to turn green and it feels shorter than it should for some weird reason. Or, when you're scrolling and it feels like it's only been 10 minutes, but then you realize it's been a half an hour. And maybe someone mentions something like, they say, well, that was a few months ago. And I realized that they actually mean something that I thought was last week. And there's this pause where my brain has to catch up in these situations. And I'll think to myself, wait, what? That already happened. And for like a second, it feels like I missed something. And I'll think, it's not an event or anything like that. It's like time itself. Like I stepped out of the room and everything just kept going. Now, most of the time, I just ignore this. I think you kind of have to. Because otherwise you're going to be standing there in the cereal aisle having a small existential crisis over Cheerios or something. But the thing is it keeps coming back, and it's not just me, because you hear about this sort of thing all the time. It's just it gets dressed up to sound harmless. So we hear stuff like time flies. Where did the year go? How can 2020 possibly be 6 years ago? And people say this stuff casually, just like they're commenting on the weather, right? But then there's always that half second after where things get a little quiet. Like everyone briefly notices something unsettling and then just decides to not look a little too closely. I mean, I've tried using the usual explanations like, I'm getting older, so my memory is getting bad or something. That's the standard answer, right? And yeah, that probably explains some of it, but it doesn't explain all of those smaller gaps like the random weekday that just disappears. You know what I'm talking about. And then maybe you experience one of those disturbing realizations that you've had hundreds, maybe thousands of those random weekdays that disappeared. And I've noticed that it feels less like time is speeding up and more like I'm not tracking it the same way anymore for some reason. Like whatever I've been using to measure my life is getting unreliable because it's not actually the clock that tells you how long something felt. It's memory. It's what you can recall. What I guess what left an imprint. I think it's whatever stood out enough to separate itself from everything else. And if that starts thinning out, then your sense of time does too. Which is where it starts to feel like something else. Because if your experience of time depends on how you remember it, what exactly are you measuring? And how much of it are you just not noticing? I started noticing it with, I guess, it's small things, nothing particularly philosophical, just trying to remember what I did like 3 days ago. Not a year ago, just 3 days ago. So close enough that it should still be there, right? You should be able to walk through it morning, afternoon, evening. But instead, I find that it's very fuzzy. I mean, I know I woke up, obviously. Eventually ate something, probably checked my phone before getting out of bed. And then there was coffee, of course. And at some point, I must have gone outside. I have a vague memory of being too cold and then too warm a little later on. And then the rest just, I guess, blends. Not really missing. It just smeared. Like someone took a whole day and rubbed it with their thumb. And it's odd because while it was happening, it didn't feel fast. It felt normal. Maybe even a little slow sometimes. Just waiting, killing time, looking at the clock. But in looking back, there's almost just nothing there. It's like time passes at one speed while you're in it, and then it gets edited down afterward. So it's like it gets condensed into something much smaller than it actually was. And I don't think that's new. What's new is how much of life fits into that category. It used to be certain days stood out. You could remember them without trying. Where you were, what the air felt like, maybe something someone said that stuck longer than it should have. Now it feels like most days don't qualify. They just kind of happen. Like you're just going through the motions. Moving from one small task to another, like you're following instructions that aren't written down anywhere. And at the end, there's really no clear edge where one day ends and the next begins. There's just this continuation. And after a while, your brain just treats it that way. It stops separating them. Everything kind of gets grouped into something vague, like that week or that month. Even though a lot probably did happen. Emails, conversations, various small decisions that felt important for about 30 seconds and then, disappeared. But none of it sticks. So when you look back, it's like you're flipping through a book where most of the pages are blank. And the few that actually do have something on them are out of order. You can tell that time passed. You just can't tell what filled it. And I think that's where the feeling comes from. So it's not that time is moving faster. But it's that less of it is being kept. Less of it makes it through whatever filter your brain is using to decide this matters enough to remember. And everything else just gets compressed and filed away under something vague or just dropped completely, which makes the past feel shorter than it was, and the present feel kind of thin. I've noticed there's also this shift that happens somewhere along the way that's hard to pinpoint. Maybe it's your early 20s. Whatever the case, it creeps up slowly and you don't notice it until it's already there. Things stop feeling new. And you learn the patterns. Conversations start to sound the same. Places feel interchangeable. Even your own reactions become predictable. And you can see the next few steps before they even happen, which is useful and makes life a little easier, I guess. There's fewer surprises. But there is a side effect. Your brain stops paying full attention. If it already knows what's coming, there's no reason for it to record it in detail. So it just fills in the blanks. And it just skims over what doesn't seem important, which is most things, really. So instead of fully experiencing a moment, you kind of just glide through it. You're half there, half running a simulation of what's about to happen next, and that simulation is smoother and faster, but it doesn't leave much behind. It's like being on autopilot, except autopilot mode doesn't remember the trip. And the more of your life that falls into that pattern, the less there is to look back on, which is kind of sad. And would explain why everything behind you starts to feel compressed and shortened. like it all happened faster than it did. Not in real time, but in terms of what made it through. And I think it's weird that it's weird to realize that your sense of how long your life has been isn't really based on how much time has passed. It's based on how much of it you actually noticed. And this is why I think noticing is important and perception is important. So sometimes we pick up our phone for no real reason, right? It's not even boredom. It's because there's 10 seconds where there's nothing happening. And instead of sitting through those few seconds, you open an app or something. It doesn't matter which one. And at first, it's intentional. You're choosing what to watch, right? But eventually that shifts to where you stop watching and stop objecting. So the next thing loads, and your thumb moves in that repetitive loop, and time inside of that rhythm starts to feel kind of odd. A minute drags if nothing lands, and yet somehow 30 minutes vanishes in a way that doesn't match what actually happened. And there's no sequence here. It's just all of these fragments. It's like a recipe you're never going to make, or a dog that seems to understand English, or whatever it might be. But the thing is none of it sticks. And when you finally put the phone down, your brain feels kind of blank, because you need a few seconds to remember where the hell you are, get your bearings. It's subtle, but those little gaps, the ones that you used to be able to sit through before technology, those don't really exist anymore. They get patched over immediately now. Byung-Chul Han wrote about how modern life has essentially erased boredom. Basically, it's been removed as the default state. Now, that might sound like a benefit, but the thing is boredom actually gives time texture, and boredom allows your mind to wander and notice things you aren't looking for. Boredom is like the precursor to creativity. But in this day and age, every empty space now is filled, because we can't bear getting a glimpse of the void for 10 seconds. And, when everything is filled up like that, there's no contrast anymore. There's no empty space to define the edges. So it all just starts to blur together. It's kind of like music. If every moment of the music is loud, eventually it just starts to sound like noise. And this is why I think time feels like it's slipping. Nothing stands out enough to anchor it. So your brain becomes a little too efficient at filtering this continuous input, and it skips over anything that isn't brand new. So what this does is it creates this weird imbalance where your days are full, but your memory of them is almost completely empty. And when you look back, it feels like there's a gap. If enough days feel like that, whole stretches of your life start to feel like they went by too fast. And not because they were short, because there's nothing solid left to hold on to. So after a while, you notice it's not just the phone. It's the rest of life too. And it's the parts that used to feel distinct, those they don't anymore. So morning comes, you've got your coffee, you're half watching something on your phone, you go to work or whatever passes for work, then you come back home, eat, sleep, repeat. The differences are small enough that your brain stops separating them. I'll think about a day last week or last month and realize I can't really tell them apart. It's the same streets, same stores, a lot of the same faces, probably the same order at the coffee shop. No, it's all rather efficient and comfortable even, but there's a cost because the days just kind of compress into each other. Months slide into years like a stack of papers shoved into a drawer without being read. And your brain, while discreetly editing, decides there's no point remembering every version of the same thing, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. And even small deviations don't stick. Like a different route home or someone mishearing your name, it registers in the moment and then it disappears. And the day just kind of, I guess, folds in on itself. I've noticed there's this underlying anxiety that comes with this. It's not really panic or dread. It's like an unease. It actually kind of makes me think of like that faint static from a TV that doesn't get shut off ever. So it's this quiet sense that something is slipping by. It's something that you think you should be holding on to, but you can't. Routines, they do usually make life easier. But routine, unfortunately, also makes time feel like it's accelerating. Because the brain, it recognizes the patterns and it predicts what's coming and it stops recording every repetition. And the more predictable your life becomes, the less memory gets created. And the less memory there is, the faster time seems to pass. Now, I think there's something somewhat cruel about this because your life is full, technically, right? But it's like holding water in a sieve. You can feel it passing, but there's really nothing to hold on to. And when you look back, it's hard to tell how much was really there. I mean, people talk about time flying like it's a quirk or something, but it's constant. It's always flying. And nobody really knows what to do with that. Which brings us back to the phone and the scrolling, the endless input. They're not creating the feeling. They're amplifying it. And they're filling those small spaces that used to let you notice things. So every unremarkable moment that gets filled is another slice of time that won't leave an imprint. It's just another part of life that just quietly evaporates. And gradually, day by day, it starts to feel faster, and it's not because the clocks are moving. It's because the parts that give time weight they're fading. And that low anxiety gets louder. You notice it, especially when things get quiet. Like when you sit for a minute and try to account for what actually happened that week. There's this slightly, I guess, eerie feeling, like the feeling you get from a liminal space. It's sort of like looking into a room that's been emptied. It's been emptied out while you weren't paying attention. I mean, it's a small thing, but it stays with you. It's a little haunting in a way. And it's not just memory or routine, though, because it feels like the world itself is moving faster, even when you're standing still. There's a sociologist, Hartmut Rosa, who calls this social acceleration. So things speed up because society pressures them to speed up, not because clocks move faster. And technology and culture, the expectations, they stack up, and the more you try to keep up, the more you feel behind. So the pace, it isn't actually random. It's manufactured constantly. And you buy into it because it feels normal and everyone else is doing it. It's the same thing with technology. Byung-Chul Han noted that modern life has made boredom nearly impossible now. Nobody waits. Nobody lets a space exist unfilled. Not anymore. There's always something coming from your device, right? A ping, a notification, or whatever. And the brain adapts to this. It moves faster, and it basically skips what it thinks doesn't matter. It's efficient like that. It's trying to save you time, except you don't really feel saved exactly. You feel squeezed. And even though every day is full, the fullness is mostly invisible, and it gets compressed into all these fragments, and that leaves the residue of unease, and there's that faint anxiety and that sense that everything is happening faster, even when nothing has really changed. So this is the pattern. It's routine, memory, it's compression, it's constant stimulation. And, when you combine these things, they amplify the feeling that life is speeding up. Our attention is pulled in way too many different directions. So naturally, we're going to notice less and remember less. And when you look back, it's almost as if someone else lived that month or that year. It's looping in some, it's like some sort of intangible loop, which is probably why that idea keeps showing up. It reminds me a little of Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence. It's the concept that everything just keeps happening over and over again. Which, if you've seen the show True Detective, this idea was interpreted by Rust Cohle as time being a flat circle. But it doesn't have to be literal to feel familiar. So not everything repeats exactly. It just repeats enough that your brain stops treating it as new. And when that happens, it stops feeling like you're moving forward. And instead you feel like you're circling inside it. And that is a pretty weird place to be. I mean, it's like you're standing on a walkway that keeps speeding up. You think you're walking at your own pace, but the floor beneath you it's in a hurry. And like most people, you keep moving anyway, because what else can you do? Ignore it? Pretend it's not happening? I mean, you can try. The system, socially, technologically, culturally, it doesn't really give you that option. It's subtle, it's unrelenting, and it works. And at some point, it stops feeling like this is just about being busy and distracted, or getting older. Those explanations cover, I guess, the surface, but they don't touch that deeper feeling that something about time isn't really lining up like it used to. The problem isn't that time, that it isn't just that it's moving fast. It's that you don't really know how you're measuring it anymore under the circumstances. Because it's not the clock that tells you how long something felt. It's memory. It's what you recall. It's what left a mark. It's what, stood out enough to separate itself from everything else. A day you remember usually feels long, but a day you don't remember feels short, even if both days have the same hours, which sounds strange because it means that your sense of life isn't really about time passing. It's about what you noticed or what your brain decided was worth keeping. And, that's not a very stable measure. In philosophy, this would be an epistemological problem. So, how you know something exists, how you perceive it, what counts as evidence. Unfortunately, memory isn't reliable because it edits and it compresses, it rearranges, it drops details, it fills gaps with what feels true. So it's less a recording and more like a rough summary after the fact. So your sense of time is always distorted, and sometimes missing chunks that you don't, or that you know are there, and that's just one layer, how you experience time. But there is another layer underneath that's actually a little harder to sit with. That's less about how time feels and more about what it actually is. That's where it drifts towards metaphysics. If your experience of time can shrink or expand depending on what you notice, then maybe time isn't solid at all. Maybe it's just something that your mind is constantly constructing and reconstructing based on what it pays attention to, which might explain why it feels different now. It's not because time changed. It's because the way you move through it changed. And I think once we realize that, it's, that's pretty hard to ignore. Every empty day, every moment that didn't register, that's not just time passing. It's time not fully forming. And that could very well be why it feels like it's slipping. Again, not faster, just less tangible, less something that you can actually hold on to. And I think that's why we just have to let it go. It's just another lesson in letting go. And that's all I've got on this topic today. As always, thanks for listening.